Okay, this lesson in Unit 3 Germany is going to be talking about another way that Hitler consolidated his power, the Enabling Act of March 1933. So what we need to do today is we need to just briefly look over the events of the Reichstag fire and how that helped Hitler, to explain how the Enabling Act was actually passed, and to evaluate why the Enabling Act helped Hitler consolidate his power, and how Hitler was able to use this event to remove some real opposition to his party. Now, just to recall the events of the Reichstag fire, this is a very, very famous source, and it symbolizes the events of the Reichstag fire. All you need to do is just write down, what do you see in this source? Who do you think the people are? What is happening? What is Hitler holding? And do you have own knowledge that links to this source? If you just pause the video here, write down what you think, and then we will go through this, and I'll add a few things that I think you need to be looking at when we look at a source of this nature. So what do we see in this source? Now, obviously, straight away, we need to be looking at the fact that Hitler is standing with Hindenburg. And if hopefully we remember this, but Hindenburg is the president of Germany. You can also see, hopefully, the Reichstag building on fire in the background. And you can also see potentially Hitler looking a lot more powerful than what he's done previously. Now, remember, by this stage, by the time this picture would have been produced, Hitler would have been the Chancellor of Germany. What is Hitler holding? Now, if anything, he's holding like a staff-like item, which symbolizes the power that Hitler has. Now, why does he have this power? This is where we need to link our own knowledge to it. This is obviously showing you the events of the Reichstag fire. Now, we know from this event that, number one, the communists were to blame. This is because a man called Marius van der Lubbe was found inside the Reichstag. It was also an opportunity for Hitler to pass the Reichstag fire bill, which were those emergency laws. And thirdly, this is a good opportunity for Hitler to build electoral success, which by the March the 5th election, he had around 44% of the vote, but that was still a problem for Hitler because he had not gained that magic number of 50. So this is where this lesson comes into play, because this lesson is going to be talking about the actual role of the Enabling Act. Now, underneath your title, you can basically write that the Enabling Act enabled Hitler to pass laws without the Reichstag. So first things first, task one, a close exercise. I'd like you to write this in your book and fill in the gaps. And then I'm going to go through the key features of the Enabling Act. So just pause the video here and give this a go. I will quickly read it for you. After the failure to get a majority on the 5th of blank 1933, Hitler proposed the Enabling Act. This act was designed to blank the power of the Reichstag. Hitler expected opposition and used his essay to blank his opponents. The new law proposed that the Reichstag could not pass laws for blank years. Blank would have complete control of the laws, and the laws could overrule the blank. However, for the law to be passed, Hitler needed to get blank of people to agree in the Reichstag. Blank of the Reichstag were already Nazis, and by the end of the election process, the bill was passed, with blank saying yes and 94 saying no. So if you add, or if you complete this close exercise in your books, pause the video here, spend 5 minutes on this, and then unpause the video so I can go through what the key features of the Enabling Act actually were. So the key features. So what Hitler aimed to get from this Enabling Act was that all powers would be passed to the Chancellor. It doesn't mean that the president disappears, but at this time, Hitler knew that Hindenburg was an aging old man. At this time, he was 86 years old. He was struggling. Hitler could pass laws without consulting the Reichstag or the president. So basically, he doesn't need Article 48 to pass laws, and he doesn't need 50% of the Reichstag to agree with him. The Reichstag in itself voted itself out of existence. They met only 12 times in the next 11 years, acting as a rubber stamp. They just basically met to see Hitler speak. This was Hitler's chance to effectively establish a dictatorship, and it triggered a Nazi revolution in government. Now, if you could summarize the Enabling Act in one word, what would it be? Underneath your close exercise, if you just write one word summarizing the Enabling Act, if you want to write down some of the key features, you absolutely can, but pause the video here and give that a go. And then we'll move on looking at how the Enabling Act was actually passed. So the next subheading you're going to put in your book is, how was the Enabling Act passed? Now, as I read through this, I want you to list any reasons on how the Enabling Act was passed. I am going to go through a couple of things that are not on the screen, so just listen carefully, and then we can develop this. And once you've done the list, choose the top 3 reasons and explain why you think they would help more than others. So there were nearly 300 Nazi deputies and 50 or so nationalists within the vote. There was an absence of communists. Now, surprise, surprise, because of the events of the Reichstag fire, around 12% of communists were absent from the vote, and those that were absent, their votes would be counted as yes. And there were also less social democrats than there could have been present. Remember, the social democrats were also a big reason why the Nazis didn't gain a majority vote at the end of the Reichstag fire. And 18% of those were missing because some were in hospital, the victims of electoral violence, and some had fled the country. Now, most of them, those of them that suffered violence, were more than likely put in hospital by the members of the SA as a way of them combating potential opposition to the Nazi Party. So along the corridors of the vote, you would have SS men in their sinister black and silver uniform. They were posted, their legs apart and their arms crossed, their eyes fixed and cruel. This was the way that the Nazis tried to intimidate the people who were voting for the Enabling Act. And outside, you had a mob of SA men who were chanting slogans, saying, "Give us the bill or else we fire," and murder. Now, on top of the intimidation aspect of the Enabling Act, Hitler also made some very, very clever deals with other political parties. Most noticeably, the Catholics, the Centre Party. Hitler basically said that he would stay out of religion, allow them to be autonomous in their religious approach, allow them to continue Sunday school, as long as they supported him with this Enabling Act. Now, obviously, the Catholic Party agreed to that because they thought it was a great deal. However, Hitler does not keep to that deal for long. And by about 1936, Hitler was well involved in religious activity, which we will talk about in future lessons. So if you just write down any reasons why the Enabling Act was passed, choose the top 3 reasons and explain why you think they would have helped others more than others. Pause the video here, spend about 8 minutes on this task, and then I'm going to go through some certain statements that you could have added in your book. So this is what I've got to why it was passed. You might have some more, which is great, and if you do, happy days. 12% of missing communist votes were yes, and 18% of social democrats were in hospital, so they were a yes too. Instantly 30% for the Nazis. The SS watched people as they walked down the corridor, so intimidated them. The SA stood outside chanting, "Give us the bill or we'll fire and murder." The SA beat up opponents so they couldn't vote, so their vote was instantly yes. The Nazis were already pretty large in numbers because of their electoral success in the 1933 election. The Nazis made a deal with the church: stay out of our way and we'll stay out of yours. A large majority of people left Germany because they were scared. Instantly, their vote would be a yes. And lastly, there were 444 people that said yes to this vote. So just as a mid-lesson knowledge check, if you just write these answers down in your book, I'm not going to go through these, but the knowledge is all what we've just done in the last few slides. What percentage of the vote did Hitler need to pass the Enabling Act? What percent of the Reichstag were Nazis? What were the result of the Enabling Act to vote? What were the key features of the Enabling Act? Try and write 3 things for that. How many times did the Reichstag meet in the next 11 years? What did the Reichstag basically do? What did the Enabling Act trigger? How did the Enabling Act help Hitler become a dictator? So, the Enabling Act has been passed. But how did Hitler help use this enabling act to help him pass and remove other threats? So in your book, we should write down just 3 titles: trade unions, political parties, and local government. And this basically, as I talk through them, write 3 to 5 facts about Hitler and how he removed the threats of these 3 groups. Now, if you don't know what a trade union is a group that represents the rights of the workers. So most people will be part of a trade union, and the most threatening thing about trade unions is they can tell people to strike. They can actually cause quite a lot of disruption within a country. So we're going to look at how the Nazis controlled those as well. So trade unions. On the 2nd of May 1933, all trade unions were banned in Germany. The Nazis said that the workers didn't need representation, and they were represented by the Nazi Party themselves. The DAF was created, which made trade unions under direct control of the Nazis. Wages were decided by the DAF, and it also tracked workers' employments. Strikes were made illegal, and any opposition would be sent to concentration camps, because by March 1933, the first concentration camp had been built in Dachau. There was no challenge to the Nazi state. With political parties, after the Enabling Act, Hitler put severe restrictions on political parties. The communists were banned from taking their seats in the Reichstag because they still got 12% in the last election, and their property was confiscated. The Social Democrats, who got 18% in the last election, had their property taken away, and by June 1933, they gave up all their seats. And by July, most political parties in Germany had dissolved. They'd gone. On the 14th of July 1933, the Nazis made themselves the only legal political party in Germany. And they held an election in November 1933 where the Nazis got 95% of the vote. 3 million people decided not to vote, but that might have been as a way of opposing the Nazi Party. And the third thing is the Länder. Now, the Länder was local parliament. Now, Hitler wanted to get rid of local parliament because they wanted total control over Germany. And the Länder would have been different because they had different ideas to the Nazis. So that Hitler decided that all 18 Länders in Germany were to be run by Nazi Party representatives, which basically means that for the first time since 1871, Germany was centralized, which in itself means that Nazis are beginning to build a significant dictatorship, which will allow Hitler to further control the country. Now, as a last task to this lesson, I'd like you to write a P paragraph. Now, this P paragraph is going to answer the question, explain how Hitler consolidated his power in the years 1933 to 1939. Now, you are going to be doing this when you come back after Christmas. So I just want to go through how to write a paragraph effectively, especially given the feedback from the mocks. I think it's quite important that we understand the difference between evidence and how to present it, and also the connectives we use for an explanation paragraph. So you should be doing a point evidence explain paragraph in the explain question. If you can't do 3 lots of evidence explain, then just stick to 2. But if you have a look on this slideshow, point, tell the examiner what you're discussing. One way Hitler consolidated his power in the years 33 to 39 was the Enabling Act. The examiner is clear what you know, clear what you're talking about, and can move on from there. Evidence. Your evidence needs to be a historical fact that's around 3 to 4 lines long. Don't be vague, be very specific. So, for example, after the Enabling Act, Hitler banned trade unions and replaced it with the DAF, which was controlled by the Nazi Party. And then when you explain it, you answer the question. This helped Hitler consolidate his power because. Now, I've underlined because it is the connective to help develop explanation. He had power over the workers, which meant strikes were stopped and made them illegal. When you introduce your next piece of evidence, you need to be looking at words like furthermore, moreover, and then do the explanation again. So the last task of this lesson is to complete the P paragraph on the Enabling Act, on how Hitler consolidated his power. And once you've done there, that's the end of this lesson. If you've got any questions, let us know. But that is the Enabling Act.